Imagine lying beneath a canopy of stars. The world is quiet now, your breath slows, and your mind begins to drift. Beyond the hum of your thoughts lies a vast and ancient realm, a story that has waited over 3,000 years to find you here. In this quiet moment between waking and sleep, there is a tale so immense, so emotionally rich, that it has shaped the soul of an entire civilization. A tale of cousins and kings, of sages and warriors, of dharma and fate, of love that defied time and hatred that shattered it. A story not just written in ink or memory, but etched into the very soul of India. Tonight, you'll journey into the heart of the Mahabharata, not as a student of scripture, not even as a seeker of truth, but simply as a traveler, following the flickering torchlight of stories passed down in whispers and chants, through temples and fire circles, over generations. Let your body sink into the mattress, unclench your jaw, and listen gently as I take you across the rivers of the Ganga, into the ancient forests of Dandaka, through palace corridors echoing with secrets, and finally, to a battlefield where time itself held its breath. This isn't just a bedtime story. It's a lullaby woven from the threads of destiny, family, power, and silence. And as you drift somewhere between sleep and story, ask yourself, where are you listening from? Is it night already where you are? Are you in Delhi or Dublin, Mumbai or Montreal? Is it late enough that the world outside your window is still? Or are there faint sounds still lingering? A ceiling fan humming, a car rolling past, someone's voice far away. Wherever you are, and whatever the time on your clock, I'm grateful you're here. Truly, you could be doing anything, but instead, you've chosen to slow down with me, to connect across time and space through one of the greatest stories ever told. So please let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I'd love to know who's drifting with me through this ancient tale tonight. Hello, my name is Sherry, and welcome to my channel. So let's begin. Before kingdoms were born, before warriors rode their chariots across dust-laden roads, before arrows ever took flight or temples echoed with prayer, there was only silence. Not the silence of sleep, nor the silence of peace, but a deep, formless stillness. No stars, no sky, no sound, no breath, only the great, unmanifest ocean of existence, timeless, nameless, and without beginning. And from that great nothingness, something stirred. In the ancient Vedic vision of the world, the universe began not with a bang, but with a breath. A long, eternal inhale, as if the cosmos itself were drawing in the will to become. From this primal breath emerged Brahman, not a god in the way we understand gods, but the source behind all things. The great consciousness, infinite and subtle, who dreamed the worlds into being. From Brahman came thought, from thought came will, and from will creation. First came time, the ever-flowing river upon which all stories sail. Then came the elements, earth, water, fire, wind, and sky. These wove together to form the first gods, the first beings, and the cosmic trinity. Brahma, the creator; Vishnu, the preserver; Shiva, the destroyer. These weren't just divine figures. They were forces, truths, patterns. Brahma opened his many eyes and spun the universe like a golden wheel, birthing the stars and planets. Vishnu lay on the endless serpent Ananta, asleep upon the ocean of milk, dreaming of all possible worlds. And Shiva, clad in silence, waited for the moment when all must return to the void. But creation was not just for gods. It was for humans too. From the churning of the cosmic waters came Manu, the first man, the root ancestor of humanity. From him descended the great lineages of kings, sages, and warriors who would come to shape the epic we now know as the Mahabharata. Among them, in the age known as Dvapara Yuga, a time before time, the world turned golden and grim. It was an age of immense knowledge and subtle decline. Dharma, the cosmic order, had begun to falter. People still followed righteousness, but with hesitation. Greed had crept into palaces. Pride had nestled in the hearts of kings, and the gods, though still present, had begun to withdraw. Their voices heard now only by the rarest sages, the stillest minds. It was into this world that the seeds of the Mahabharata were sown. But seeds do not bloom overnight. They sleep under the soil, hidden from the eye, storing the memory of light. And before the war, before the conflict, there was a tale of longing, of love between a mortal king and a goddess who walked like a river. His name was Shantanu, and his story begins not with a war, but with a walk along the Ganga. But before we reach him, let us linger here a moment longer at the edge of time. Take a breath and let it stretch. Can you feel it, that quiet hum beneath your ribs, like the soft drum of something ancient? That's the same pulse that beats through these stories. The same rhythm heard by the sages of old when they sat beside fire in the forests, retelling the tale that never ended. You see, the Mahabharata was never meant to be read as a book. It was meant to be heard. At night, in stillness, it was passed down by Vyasa, the great sage, who didn't merely write, he remembered. He saw the past, as one sees a memory too large for the mind to hold. Vyasa, whose name means the compiler, was more than a poet. He was a bridge between divine and mortal, memory and myth. He was born on an island in the Yamuna River to a fisherwoman and the sage Parashara. And from the moment he was born, he seemed to carry the weight of centuries in his gaze. It was he who gathered the songs and stories passed down through generations and wove them into one great epic, longer than the Iliad and Odyssey combined. An epic not just of war, but of why men go to war, not just of gods, but of the fragile humans who walk beside them, cursed with choice. The Mahabharata, he said, contains everything. If something is found here, it may be found elsewhere, but if it is not found here, it exists nowhere else. It holds poetry, philosophy, cosmology, drama, law, politics, romance, revenge. It is a library in the shape of a tale, and at its center is a family, two sets of cousins, bound by blood, separated by fate, each believing themselves right, each marching toward a war they could neither escape nor fully understand. But we are not there yet. We are still in the hush before the first heartbeat, before Bhishma's vow, before Draupadi's fire, before Krishna's flute. So let me ask you something. Have you ever stood at the beginning of a story and felt the shape of it before a word was said? That faint knowing, like thunder on the edge of a clear sky. That's where we are now. The players are not yet on the stage. The war drums have not yet sounded. But the wheels of fate have begun to turn, and down by the banks of the Ganga, a man will soon fall in love with a goddess. A prince will be born and given away, and a vow will be made that will ripple through generations like a stone thrown into time. But that is the next breath, the next moment. And when we take it, we step into a kingdom, into a promise, into a curse wrapped in duty. So rest your head and let that story find you. Let the silence deepen now. You're drifting gently down a river, not just any river, but one older than any map, any nation. The Ganga. Sacred, winding, eternal. She flows like memory. Like a song only the soul remembers. Her waters are cool even in summer, soft even when angry. To the people of ancient Bharat, she was not merely a river. She was a goddess, a mother, a bridge between heaven and earth. And once she walked upon the land in human form. The story begins in the golden city of Hastinapura, which lay nestled on the banks of the Ganga. Its towers rose above the trees, its banners fluttered with the pride of many victories. At its helm sat King Shantanu, a noble man, wise, just, and achingly alone. He ruled well. The people loved him. The land was peaceful. And yet, there was a weight in his chest that no crown could lift. A quiet sorrow, a loneliness that pressed on his shoulders at dusk, when even kings cannot command sleep. And then, one day, while walking beside the river, he saw her. She was not like other women. No maid-servant or noble daughter. No queen in silk. She wore no jewels. Her hair flowed like midnight down her back. And her eyes held the calm of 1,000 monsoons. She said nothing, only looked at him. And in that moment, the king, proud, composed Shantanu, forgot how to speak. Ganga, he didn't know her name yet. But something inside him, something ancient, recognized her. As if his soul remembered hers from another life. That's how the Mahabharata tells it. Love, in those days, wasn't a courtship. It was a remembering. And so he approached her. Slowly, gently. "Will you be mine?" he asked simply. And she said yes. But she had one condition. "You must never question me," she said, "no matter what I do. Not a single word of judgment or doubt. If you do, I will leave." Now imagine that. Standing in front of someone who makes your heart ache with joy, and being told that their love comes at the cost of your understanding. But Shantanu agreed. How could he not? And for a time they were happy. She became his queen. The court whispered, the people watched. She was unlike any woman they'd seen. Distant, serene, as if her heart beat to a rhythm none could hear. And then she gave birth to a son, a healthy, radiant boy. Shantanu's joy knew no bounds, a prince, an heir. But before the king could even name him, Ganga took the child in her arms, walked to the river, and drowned him. No tears, no explanation, just a silent return to the Ganga, and Shantanu remembered his promise. He said nothing. He didn't scream, didn't demand. He simply watched in horror, in grief, in confusion. And when she returned, as if nothing had happened, he said nothing still. And again she conceived, and again bore a son, and again walked him into the river, and let the water take him. One by one she drowned 7 sons, 7 lives, 7 little princes, gone without a name or cradle. Can you imagine the pain of that silence, of a father who cannot speak, even as his heart breaks over and over again? And yet he endured, for love, for the fear of losing her. But when the 8th child was born, something changed. The boy was radiant, more so than the others. His eyes shone with something more than life, almost divine. And as Ganga turned to take him to the water once more, Shantanu could not hold back. "Stop," he cried. Why would you kill your own children? What curse drives you to this?" And just like that, she stopped. She turned to face him, and for the first time, her eyes were not calm. They were sad. "You promised," she said softly, "and now the time has come for me to leave." She held the infant close, kissed his forehead, and her form began to shimmer. "I am Ganga," she said, "the river you worship. I came to earth to fulfill a curse." And she told him then the story of the 8 Vasas, celestial beings, who had once angered a powerful sage. As punishment, they were to be born as mortals on earth, but Ganga, compassionate and loyal, had agreed to bear them and release them swiftly from the burden of human life. The 7 she had drowned were free. Their suffering was brief, but the 8th, this one, she said, had to remain. His destiny was tied to the world of men. He would become the greatest warrior the world had ever seen, a man of impossible vows, a protector of kings, and a prisoner of his own promise. "I will raise him," Ganga said, "in the heavens, and when the time is right, I will return him to you." And with that, she vanished into the river, cradling the child. The king stood alone on the banks, no longer just a ruler, but a man who had loved a goddess, lost 7 sons to the current, and waited for a child he could not raise. And that child would one day be known as Bhishma, the one who never married, the one who never became king, the one who chose duty over desire, and whose choices would shape the fate of generations. But for now, Shantanu watched the river flow, night after night, waiting for the son the water had taken. And far above, beyond the reach of human sorrow, a boy was learning from sages and gods, learning of dharma, of war, of silence, learning how to bear a curse that would never end. Sleep now, if you can, for we are about to enter a time of promises, the kind that shape empires and shatter hearts. Years passed, and the river sang on. Shantanu aged with quiet dignity. His hair, once black as thunderclouds, was touched by the mist of time. Yet every evening he found himself drawn to the banks of the Ganga, as though her water still whispered to him, as though her scent still lingered in the folds of memory. And then, one day, the river stirred. Out of its glistening heart stepped a boy, no longer an infant, but tall, poised, radiant. His shoulders were broad, his gaze like the horizon, deep and endless. In his hands, he held a bow, and in his bearing, a silence that spoke of the sky. Ganga appeared beside him, her form glimmering like sunlight on moving water. "This is your son," she said to Shantanu, "born of me, trained by the greatest sages. He knows the Vedas. He commands every weapon known to gods and men. He will be your strength, your protector, your son, though not your heir." And then she was gone. The king rushed forward, tears unshackling from years of silence, and embraced the boy who would be called Divavrata. But the world would come to know him by another name, Bhishma. Divavrata was unlike any prince the kingdom had seen. He rode horses like the wind itself. He spoke with the calm of the mountains. And in court, he needed no crown to command reverence. The people adored him. The ministers trusted him. The army followed him without hesitation. He was the future, strong, wise, loyal. Shantanu, for the first time in many years, felt whole. His kingdom was stable, his lineage secure, but the wheel of fate does not stop turning, even for kings. One day, while hunting near the forest edge, Shantanu caught sight of a young woman. She was humble in dress, barefoot along the river path. Yet there was something about her. Her voice carried like temple bells. Her laughter softened the wind. She sold fish with her father, a simple fisherman, but her beauty struck the king like an arrow. Her name was Satyavati, and just like that, Shantanu's heart, which had once belonged to a goddess, stirred again. He went to her father, eager to ask for her hand, but the fisherman, though respectful, was firm. "I cannot give her to you," he said, "unless you promise that her children, not any others, will inherit your throne." The words fell like stones into a still lake, because Shantanu already had an heir, Divavrata, his beloved son, the pride of Hastinapura. Shantanu left, silent and shattered. He could not betray his son. And yet, his love for Satyavati consumed him like fire. He returned to the palace, changed, weighed down, a man split in two by love and duty. And Divavrata noticed. He saw the sorrow behind his father's eyes, the unspoken pain, and one day, unable to bear it, he sought out the fisherman himself. "I am Divavrata," he said, "son of Ganga and Shantanu. I promise you, your daughter's sons shall inherit the throne of Hastinapura." But the fisherman hesitated. And what if your own sons challenge that right? And then Devavrata made a vow that would echo through time. I shall never marry. I shall never have children. I renounce all claim to the throne forever. The river stilled, the winds fell silent. Even the gods, they say, paused in their celestial halls to listen. Such a vow had never been made. The skies rumbled in awe. Flowers fell from heaven, and the gods themselves gave him a name, Bhishma, he of the terrible vow. Imagine this now, a young man, royal, noble, beloved, giving up everything, not for power, not for revenge, but for love, not even his own love, but his father's, a promise made not to gain, but to protect. He returned to his father and offered him the future on bent knee. And Shantanu, upon hearing what his son had done, wept. He embraced Bhishma, not with pride, but with the kind of heartbreak that can only come from love too great for words. In return, he gave Bhishma a boon, the power to choose the moment of his death. Bhishma would not die unless he wished to, a blessing, a curse, a fate both sacred and cruel. From that day on, Bhishma served Hastinapura as its pillar. Never king, but greater than kings. He led its armies, guarded its laws, advised its rulers. He remained unmarried, untouched, devoted. But devotion, as the Mahabharata often shows us, can be a chain just as much as a sword. For Bhishma's vow, so noble, so pure, would one day trap him, bind him, make him witness to horrors he could not stop, because his loyalty would not allow him to move. But that is yet to come. For now he stood tall, alone but unbending, a prince without a crown, a warrior without a home, and a man bound not by chains, but by his own word. So the wheel turned again. Shantanu married Satyavati, and from her came 2 more sons, Chitrangada and Vichitravirya. Young, proud, unseasoned, Bhishma stepped aside, quiet, watching, always loyal. But fate is not done with this family. Satyavati's sons would soon fall to time, and with their deaths, a new crisis would rise, a desperate need for heirs, and a story of secret unions, forbidden births, and whispered legacies would begin to stir in the shadows. But we'll come to that in time. Tonight, as you drift further into stillness, think of Bhishma, a young man on the steps of a river, sword in hand, heart heavy with duty, a man who gave everything so that others might live their stories, and yet who would one day wonder if he had chosen the right path at all. Hastinapura, the city of elephants, it rose like a crown on the plains of the Kuru kingdom. Stone towers shimmering in the midday heat, banners fluttering like wings in the wind. Its streets were wide and dusted with sandalwood. Its temples rang with prayer. Its markets teemed with spice merchants, potters, storytellers, and children darting barefoot between stalls. And at its heart stood the great ivory palace, where decisions were made and secrets were born. From the outside, all was well. With Bhishma guarding the throne, the kingdom was secure. King Shantanu's reign, though aging, was remembered fondly. And now, with his wife Satyavati beside him, a new line of kings seemed assured. But fate, as ever in the Mahabharata, had other plans. Satyavati bore Shantanu 2 sons, Chitrangada and Vichitravirya. Both were born into the luxury Bhishma had never known. Both were raised not in the forests of sages, but in the echoing halls of the palace. And though Bhishma loved them as kin, he saw the difference, the softness, the inexperience. When Shantanu died peacefully one night with Bhishma at his side, it was Chitrangada, the elder son, who was crowned king. But Chitrangada was ambitious. He saw himself not only as a ruler of men, but a conqueror of gods. He challenged kingdoms. He thirsted for glory. And one day, drunk on pride, he challenged a celestial being who shared his name, Chitrangada, the Gandharva, a radiant warrior of the heavens. They fought for days. Earthquakes shook the land. Winds turned black with dust. And in the end, the king of Hastinapura fell, cut down not by a mortal blade, but by divine fury. He died without an heir. And so the burden fell to his younger brother, Vichitravirya, still a boy. Bhishma took him under his wing, training him, guiding him, shielding him from the vipers that stir when a throne sits unguarded. But the kingdom needed more than a boy. It needed a queen. So Bhishma rode out once more, not for glory, not for love, but for duty. He traveled to the kingdom of Kashi, where 3 princesses, Amba, Ambika, and Ambalika, were holding their swayamvara, the ancient ritual where a bride chooses her groom. Bhishma, acting on behalf of his half-brother, did not come with diplomacy. He came with purpose. He abducted all 3, single-handedly defeating the kings who had gathered, and rode back to Hastinapura, the 3 princesses in tow. This act, noble in its intent, would carry consequences that bled across generations. For one of the sisters, Amba, was already in love. Her heart had chosen another. And when she confessed this to Bhishma, he released her, but the man she loved refused her, now seeing her as defiled by another's touch. And so, cast out from both love and home, Amba returned to Bhishma, not as a woman seeking solace, but as a soul seeking revenge. "I blame you," she said, "and one day I will be your death." Bhishma, bound by his vow, said nothing, but the echo of her words would haunt him until the end. Meanwhile, Ambika and Ambalika were married to Vichitravirya. The young king took them both as queens. But he was weak in constitution, more fond of wine than war, more interested in indulgence than governance. And soon he, too, died, leaving no children behind. The palace, once filled with laughter and the music of a new dynasty, fell silent. The throne was empty again, and Bhishma, bound by vow, yet again could not claim it. Satyavati, now queen mother, was frantic. 2 sons gone, no heirs, the great Kuru line teetering at the edge of extinction. And it was here, in this moment of desperation, that she revealed a secret. Before marrying Shantanu, she had borne a child, a boy, a gifted, divine son born of a sage, conceived on the waters, and taken away before he could ever call her mother. His name was Vyasa. Yes, that Vyasa, the sage who would one day compose the Mahabharata, the seer of past, present, and future. Satyavati summoned him, and when he came wild-haired, bare-chested, eyes burning with insight, she begged him, continue the bloodline, save the throne. But the Vedic laws were complex. To preserve the royal line, a brother could father children with his brother's widows. And so, Vyasa agreed not as a man, but as a vessel of fate. What followed was strange and shrouded in ritual. Vyasa visited Ambika, the first queen. But the moment she saw him coarse and wild as the forest, she shut her eyes in fear. And the child she bore, Dhritarashtra, was born blind. Then came Ambalika. She paled at the sight of him, and her son, Pandu, was born weak in body, though sharp of mind. And then, in secret, Ambika was asked to try again. But instead of going herself, she sent a maidservant in her place. The result was Vijaya, wise, noble, but born of a servant womb, and thus barred from the throne. 3 sons, 3 strands of fate, 1 blind, 1 cursed, 1 pure but untouchable. And so the throne of Hastinapura passed not to a single heir, but to question, who among them is worthy? Time passed. The boys grew. Dhritarashtra, though blind, had the strength of 100 men. His temper was quick, but his love was deep. Pandu was calm, thoughtful, skilled with bow and scripture alike. But cursed, as we shall soon see, in a way that would shape the lives of 5 extraordinary sons. And Vijaya, honest, humble, remained forever on the sidelines. His words were golden, but he would never sit on the throne. And above them all Bhishma stood, still watching, still guiding, still holding together a kingdom that did not quite know what it was becoming. For though the halls of Hastinapura echoed with laughter once again, shadows had begun to gather. In its rise, the palace had grown rich, proud, layered in ambition, and in its cracks, something darker had begun to stir, not yet visible, but inevitable. For the greatest stories are not made of peace. They are made of tension, of decisions, of the quiet poisoning of hearts. And soon, very soon, children would be born. Children who would carry all of this, the love, the pride, the curses, the silence, into the future. The palace of Hastinapura, once echoing with the voices of kings, now waited, poised between 2 brothers, each shaped by fate, each standing before a throne that could not hold them both. The blind Dhritarashtra, powerful, proud, born of a queen, and Pandu, pale in body, but bright in mind, cursed in ways he did not yet understand. They were not rivals, not yet. But the question of kingship is a heavy one, and even when unspoken, it hangs in the air like incense, slow, sweet, and suffocating. From the start, Dhritarashtra was stronger. He could bend steel with his arms. His voice filled halls like thunder. He trained tirelessly, always seeking to prove that what his eyes lacked, his will could overcome. But the elders of the court, especially Bhishma and Vijaya, were cautious. A blind king, they feared, might not see beyond his own inner world, might miss the shifting winds of war, might, in his frustration, lean toward pride rather than patience. So, after much deliberation, and with great unease, Pandu was crowned. Dhritarashtra bowed. Outwardly, he accepted, but inside, a quiet resentment began to kindle, not yet a fire, but a spark. And that spark would pass down to his sons like a whisper wrapped in poison. Pandu, for his part, was a gentle king. He was not made for court intrigue or drunken councils. He preferred the sound of arrows in the air, the rhythm of horses beneath his feet, the quiet learning of scriptures at dawn. He ruled with a steady hand and a humble heart. In time, he married 2 queens. The first was Kunti, daughter of the Yadava clan, known for her devotion and calm spirit. The second, Madri, a princess from the kingdom of Madra, graceful, proud, and mysterious. Under Pandu's rule, Hastinapura prospered. But fate, as ever, had not finished its script. One day, while hunting in the deep woods, Pandu loosed an arrow at what appeared to be a pair of mating deer. The animals cried out, but not in death. Their voices changed, rising in human anguish. They were not deer at all, but a sage and his wife, cursed to live in animal form. And with their dying breath, the sage cursed Pandu, "As you have taken life in the act of love, so too shall you be cursed. If ever you touch your wife in desire, you shall die at once." The forest fell silent. The birds stilled. Even the wind seemed to retreat. Pandu was broken, shattered by guilt, stripped of joy. He renounced the throne and retreated into the mountains, taking his queens with him. Back in Hastinapura, Dhritarashtra finally rose. The throne was his. Officially, he was king in Pandu's absence, but in truth, it was a delicate balance, for he ruled always in the shadow of the brother who had once been chosen over him. And this quiet resentment, this crack in his soul, widened with time. Pandu, meanwhile, lived in exile, but the ache within him deepened, not for power or court life, but for children, for sons, for legacy. And here the story twists again, because Kunti, his first wife, carried a secret. In her youth, she had served the sage Durvasa, a powerful and temperamental seer. Impressed by her devotion, he had gifted her a mantra, a sacred incantation that allowed her to summon any god and bear his child. She had once tested it out of youthful curiosity, and the sun god had appeared, blazing and golden, placing a child in her arms. That child, born out of wedlock, was Karna, whom she abandoned in a basket upon the river, his golden earrings and divine armor marking him for a destiny beyond her reach. Now, with Pandu's curse heavy upon them, Kunti revealed the truth. Pandu, astonished but hopeful, urged her to use the mantra again, this time to save their legacy. And so, beneath the vast Himalayan sky, Kunti invoked Yama, the god of dharma. From this union came Yudhishthira, calm, just, unwavering in his morality. Next, she called upon Vayu, the wind god, and from him came Bhima, fierce, massive, strong as 10 men, destined to crush mountains with his fists. Then she summoned Indra, king of the heavens, and from his essence was born Arjuna, the archer, the thoughtful warrior, the soul of balance and honor, 3 sons, born not of human union, but divine invocation. Later, feeling sympathy for Pandu's second wife, Kunti shared the mantra with Madri, who called upon the Ashwini twins, celestial healers. From them were born Nakula and Sahidva, graceful, wise, perfect complements to the trio born before them. And so, in the quiet of exile, the 5 Pandavas were born, children of the gods, heirs to a kingdom, bound by more than blood, bound by fate. But happiness in the Mahabharata is always a passing season. For one spring morning, with the air warm and the earth in bloom, Pandu felt desire stir in his heart once more, a moment of weakness, a whisper of longing. He turned to Madri, and though she begged him to remember the curse, he kissed her, and in that instant fell dead in her arms. The mountain echoed with silence. Madri, torn by guilt and love, lit his pyre and stepped into the flames beside him. Only Kunti remained alone, with 5 sons and a future that now pointed back to Hastinapura. And what of Dhritarashtra? While Pandu raised gods in the mountains, he raised sons in the palace. His wife, Gandhari, had vowed to blindfold herself for life, so that she would never enjoy a sight her husband could not see. Her devotion was unmatched, and from her womb came a terrible birth. Not a child, but a mass of flesh, cold and silent. The sages intervened. They divided the flesh into 100 pieces, placing each into a jar of clarified butter, and from these jars were born 100 sons. The eldest was Duryodhana. Even at birth, the omens were grim. Jackals howled. The sky darkened. Horses screamed. Vijara warned the king, "Abandon this child. He will bring ruin to your line." But Dhritarashtra, blinded not by lack of sight, but by fatherly love, refused. And so, the children of 2 brothers grew unaware of the fire slowly kindling between them. One set born of forest, of gods, of exile. One set born of palace, of pride, of silent resentment. And Hastinapura, that ancient city of elephants, waited once more. For time was circling in. The next chapter would not be of kings or sages, but of children, of rivals, of a slow brewing storm between cousins who had once played together, but would one day face each other across a battlefield soaked in blood. They were still children. Before the battles and the oaths, before exile and betrayal, there was laughter. There were games in the courtyards, races along stone corridors, the crack of wooden swords against each other's shoulders, and the warm scent of oil lamps flickering through the halls of Hastinapura. The palace, once silent in grief, now echoed with the voices of young princes. From the mountains returned Kunti, veiled in grief, with 5 sons at her side. The Pandavas, sons of gods, unknown to most, raised in quiet devotion and mountain wind. In the palace already stood the Kauravas, the 100 sons of Dhritarashtra, led by the eldest, Duryodhana, proud, fierce-eyed, and already aware of a truth he could never unknow. The Pandavas were better. Not because they claimed to be, in fact they didn't, but they were. Yudhishthira, the eldest, carried a calm that unsettled men twice his age. He would not lie, even to win a game. His silence often spoke louder than other men's fury. Bhima, broad-shouldered and brash, laughed loud, ate twice as much as any other boy, and could lift a chariot's wheel with one hand. Duryodhana saw him as both rival and threat. Arjuna, wiry and quiet, lived with a bow in his hands. He would spend hours watching the birds from the terrace, eyes locked, breath stilled, not moving until he could hit their shadow without touching the leaves. Nakula and Sahidva, the youngest twins, glided like poetry through the palace. Graceful, soft-spoken, loyal beyond words. They rarely fought, but when they did, their strikes landed with startling precision. To the outside world, they were all one family. Cousins, princes of the Kuru line. But behind the silk curtains of the palace, a deeper story played out, not one of love, but of rivalry. Duryodhana, from the moment he saw Bhima crush a stone in his fist during a game, felt it in his gut, that knot of envy. It was not just that the Pandavas were talented. It was that they were loved. The ministers admired them. The citizens whispered their names with awe. Even Bhishma's old eyes softened when Arjuna entered a room. And envy in a child festers silently. It curls inward, then grows teeth. Duryodhana tried to hide it at first. He smiled when others smiled. He joined their games. But when Bhima pushed him too hard in a mock fight, when Yudhishthira bested him in debate, when Arjuna's arrows flew truer than his own, something began to coil inside him, a serpent, patient and hungry. It was around this time that the royal education began in earnest. The princes, all of them, were to be trained not just in warfare, but in wisdom, in dharma, governance, the arts of diplomacy, and the laws of karma. To lead this sacred instruction came one of the greatest masters of his time, Acharya Drona. Drona was not merely a teacher. He was a storm in robes of white, tall, sharp-eyed, and wrapped in silence. Drona carried a mystery with him. He was not born of the palace. He did not come from gold or power. He came from the forests, the son of the sage Bharadwaja, and the ashes of betrayal. Years ago, Drona had been poor, mocked by kings, overlooked by those with softer hands and harder hearts. But he had studied, he had trained, and now he returned not for glory, but for revenge, not bloodied revenge, but one that would grow slowly, through the rise of a pupil so gifted that the world itself would bow. Arjuna, From the moment he watched the boy notch an arrow, Drona knew. This is the one. Drona set trials for his students, some physical, some spiritual, some almost cruel in their intensity. He taught them the code of the warrior, the subtle secrets of Astra, the divine weapons hidden in mantras and meditation. He tested their resolve with silence, with long hours under the sun, with drills that made their fingers bleed, and Arjuna never faltered. He trained in the dark, long after the others slept. When food was brought to him, he ate without looking, realizing one day that if his hands could find food in darkness, they could find arrows too. It was this devotion that won Drona's heart. But devotion creates jealousy. Duryodhana, watching from the side, saw his rival rise and clenched his fists in secret. Bhima laughed too loudly. Arjuna aimed too well. Even Nakula and Sahadeva, who never mocked or challenged, seemed to move through the palace like future kings, while he remained just the eldest of 100. So Duryodhana plotted. His first target was Bhima, the strongest. One night, under the guise of friendship, he offered him a feast, food laced with poison. When Bhima collapsed, Duryodhana had him thrown into the Ganga, bound in chains. But Bhima did not die. The serpents of the river bit him, and their venom clashed with the poison in his veins, waking powers dormant within him. He was found by the Nagas, who healed and fed him, and sent him back stronger than before. When Bhima returned to the palace, Duryodhana smiled tightly. But inside, fear began to stir. The princes grew. Their bodies changed. Their skills sharpened. Their rivalries deepened. And one day, Drona held a great test, an archery challenge before the whole court. He placed a wooden bird on a distant branch. Each prince was to shoot its eye, but only after answering one question. "What do you see?" Yudhishthira said. "I see the tree, the branch, and the bird." Bhima said, "I see the branch and the bird." Duryodhana said, "I see the bird." But Arjuna, when his turn came, said, "I see only the eye." And he hit it perfectly. Not once, but again and again. The court erupted in applause. Drona nodded, and Duryodhana burned inside. That night, as the torches flickered against palace stone, he whispered to his uncle Shakuni, the cunning man from Gandhara. "Tell me," he said, "how do I destroy them?" And the uncle smiled. "Not with weapons," he said, "but with time and fire, and a game they cannot win." But that would come later. For now, in this moment, the princes still laughed, still raced down corridors, still dreamed the innocent dreams of youth. But the first cracks had appeared. The lessons of the forest were ending. The fire was being kindled, and the next time arrows flew, they would not be wooden. The wind over Panchala that evening was not ordinary. It did not sweep gently across fields or dance lightly through trees. It came sharp, like the breath of destiny, stirring the smoke of yajnas, curling through temples, whispering secrets into the ears of those who could still hear fate when it spoke. And it was into this wind that she was born, Draupadi, the dark flame, princess with eyes like molten obsidian, and a soul forged not of flesh, but of fire itself. Her story begins not with love or marriage, but with war or the preparation for it. Her father, King Drupada, ruler of Panchala, once shared a boyhood friendship with Drona, the very teacher of the Kuru princes. They had studied together, played together, dreamed of futures shaped by shared memories and noble aspirations. But the world changes boys into men, and men into kings. And kings remember insults longer than friendships. Drupada had once insulted Drona, denying his claim to their youthful bond. A beggar, he said, cannot be the friend of a king. Drona had not forgotten. And when his pupils, the Kuru princes, grew into warriors, he sent them to capture Drupada and return him in chains. They did. Humiliated and burning with revenge, Drupada performed a great yajna, a sacrificial fire ritual not to ask for wealth or longevity, but for a child who would be a weapon. The flames answered. From the sacred fire rose not one child, but two. First came Drishtadyumna, fierce-eyed and unshakable, destined to kill Drona himself. And then Draupadi. She did not cry. She did not tremble. She opened her eyes as if she had seen many worlds before this one. Her skin was deep like twilight. Her hair fell in curls blacker than midnight. And the sages who gathered around the flames looked at each other and said, "She will change the course of history." But even they could not have imagined how. Draupadi grew in the palace of Panchala like a goddess walking among mortals. She was not only beautiful. That would have been too simple. She was wise, frighteningly so, and sharp in speech. She read the Vedas like others read poems. Her laughter was rare, but when it came, it carried both joy and warning. Suitors came in droves, of course. Kings, princes, warriors. They arrived with gold, elephants, armies. Some begged, others boasted. Drupada refused them all. He had something else in mind. He declared that his daughter would be won in a Swayamvara, a public contest of strength and skill, where the victor would win her hand. But not just any contest. At the center of the arena, he placed a bow impossibly heavy, strung with a cord as stiff as iron. Above, on a rotating contraption, hung a fish. Below, a pool of oil. Whoever wished to marry Draupadi would have to string the bow, aim upward, and hit the eye of the spinning fish, while only looking at its reflection. A test not only of might, but of focus, balance, and divine precision, and the world came to watch. By this time, the Pandavas were in hiding. After a failed assassination attempt, when Duryodhana tried to burn them alive in a house of lacquer, they had escaped and wandered through the forests, disguised as Brahmins, humble seekers of truth. With them was Kunti, ever watchful, ever composed, holding the threads of destiny between her tired fingers. When the Swayamvara was announced, the brothers, curious and ever hungry for stories, joined the crowds, their identities hidden. The arena shimmered with silk canopies. Perfumed winds carried songs from distant corners. Kings jostled in golden armor. Drupada sat tall, regal, next to his daughter, who remained veiled, silent, like a flame waiting to rise. One by one, the suitors stepped forward. Some boasted. Some failed to even lift the bow. Others strung it, but missed the fish's eye entirely. Even Karna, the mighty archer, son of the sun, yet unrecognized by the Pandavas, stepped forward. He might have won. He might have pierced the fish as easily as the sky. But Draupadi stopped him. With eyes calm and voice cool, she said, "I do not choose a man of unknown birth." The court fell silent. Karna's face darkened. He said nothing, only turned and walked away. But inside him, something shattered. And then Arjuna stood, still in disguise, still cloaked as a Brahmin. He lifted the bow. The crowd gasped. The bow arced like a dragon in his hands. He notched an arrow, breathed once, and fired, not at the fish, but at its eye as reflected in the oil below. The fish jerked. The arrow struck. A perfect shot. The court exploded in disbelief. The veils parted. Draupadi walked to him, eyes locked not in awe, but in recognition. As if she had always known this moment would come. The Pandavas took her home, where Kunti, without looking, said words that would ripple through generations. "Share what you have brought, my sons, as you always do." She thought it was alms, food, an offering, but it was a bride, bound by honor, by dharma, and by the strange rhythms of fate. The Pandavas, all five, became husbands to one woman, not as a symbol of conquest, but of unity. Draupadi, daughter of fire, became the wife of 5 gods. Each loved her differently. Yudhishthira saw in her a queen, a partner in duty. Bhima, ever loyal, saw in her a sister of strength. Arjuna, who had won her, loved her like a flame he could never fully hold. Nakula and Sahadeva worshipped her with silent grace, and she accepted them all, not as an object, but as a force, as destiny. But jealousy does not die easily. Far away in Hastinapura, Duryodhana heard the news of the Swayamvara, of the disguised Pandavas, of Draupadi's hand, and a deeper hatred began to churn. He would take it all back, he vowed. The kingdom, the respect, even her, especially her. Because to Duryodhana, Draupadi was not just a woman. She was a prize that should never have gone to his enemies. But fate is not swayed by fury. Not yet. For now, Draupadi sat beside her 5 husbands, wrapped in silk, eyes calm, watching the stars. She did not yet know what would be done to her, what shame would follow, what fire would rise. But in the stillness of that night, one thing was certain. She would not be silent forever. The earth remembers every footstep of glory. From barren lands once choked in thorn and dust, a city arose, gleaming like a celestial mirage, with towers that kissed the sky and courtyards paved with crystal. This was Indraprastha, the jewel of the Pandavas, the kingdom born from ash and ambition. But before it was a palace, it was a promise. When the Pandavas revealed themselves at Draupadi's Swayamvara, the court of Hastinapura was stunned. They had been presumed dead, lost in the fire Duryodhana had arranged for them. Yet there they stood, alive and triumphant, with Draupadi at their side, and the favor of the people swelling behind them like a tidal wave. Dhritarashtra, ever fearful of his son's fury yet tethered to the law of dharma, offered a compromise. "Let there be peace," he said. "Divide the kingdom. Let Yudhishthira rule a share." But what he gave them was not land. It was wilderness, a swath of desolate plains, unclaimed by farmers, haunted by serpents and silence. Khandavaprastha, it was called a cursed tract, better forgotten. Yet the Pandavas did not frown. They took the gift, and with hearts of fire and hands of stone, they began to build. Their first act was to burn the past. Agni, the god of fire, approached them, weak and famished. He had consumed too many offerings of ghee and sought to renew his strength by devouring the entire Khandava forest. But the forest was protected, home to Nagas, sages, spirits, and even gods. Agni begged Arjuna and Krishna, for by now Krishna, the dark prince of Dwarka, had joined the Pandavas to help him. In exchange, he gifted Arjuna the mighty bow Gandhava, a quiver that never emptied, and a chariot driven by divine steeds. With these, Arjuna rained fire-tipped arrows upon the forest. Flames danced for days, and smoke crowned the sky. Creatures fled, spirits wailed, trees cracked like thunder. From the ashes of that destruction, a city was born. Maya, the great architect of the Asuras, grateful to Arjuna for sparing his life during the burning, came forth to offer his art. He did not build walls. He wove illusions. Indraprastha shimmered like a dream made real, floors so polished they mirrored the sky, pools so clear they appeared like marble, walls that shifted with the light, windows that sang when touched by wind. The throne room defied geometry. Space curled in strange angles, and the very air shimmered with unseen grace. It was a palace unlike any in Bharat. Even the gods, it was said, looked down upon it with wonder. Here, Yudhishthira was crowned king. Draupadi, radiant and poised, became queen, her presence a calm center amid glory's spinning wheel. The Pandavas stood tall, not just as warriors now, but as rulers. And for a while, the world breathed in peace. Yet, envy survives even in paradise. Far away in Hastinapura, Duryodhana heard tales of the city, of courtyards paved in light, of peacocks carved from sapphire, of fountains that sang like sitars. He laughed at first, but then the stories kept coming about how the citizens of Indraprastha had begun calling Yudhishthira Dharmaraja, king of righteousness, how bards sang of Arjuna's conquests, how even merchants whispered that the true heart of the Kuru Empire had shifted. And when Duryodhana finally visited as a guest, not as a ruler, the city humiliated him in ways the sword never could. They say he stepped into the throne room, mistaking a pool for glass, and fell in head first. Courtiers chuckled. Some gasped. Draupadi, from the shadows of her chamber, laughed quietly and said, "The blind son of a blind king." It was a whisper, perhaps never even spoken aloud, but Duryodhana heard it, or thought he did, and it burned. Not just the fall, not just the laughter, but her, Draupadi, the woman he could not have, the queen who smiled from beside the throne of his enemy. In that moment, wet and humiliated, a vow formed in his chest like cold iron. He would see her fall. He would take everything back. Not through battle, no, not yet, but through a game. Back in Indraprastha, the Pandavas reveled in prosperity. Yudhishthira, ever dutiful, sought more than wealth. He wanted to fulfill his role as a Chakravarti, a universal monarch. To do this, he needed to perform the Rajasuya Yajna, an imperial ritual that proclaimed his sovereignty over all other kings. But first, he had to conquer them, or win their allegiance. The 4 younger Pandavas set out in 4 directions. Bhima marched east, crushing defiant kings like thunder smashing mountains. Arjuna rode north, scattering armies like chaff before the wind. Nakula and Sahadeva went south and west, bringing wealth and tribute without unnecessary bloodshed. Even Krishna himself came forward, offering counsel, strategy, and blessings. And when the kings of Bharat finally gathered in Indraprastha to witness the Rajasuya, there was no doubt. Yudhishthira stood at the heart of the world. At the ceremony, one final ritual remained, the honoring of the foremost guest. Among the assembled kings, including Bhishma, Drona, and even mighty sages, Yudhishthira chose Krishna. Many cheered, but one man, seated among the guests, rose in anger. Shishupala, a rival prince and Krishna's longtime adversary. He mocked, he accused, he hurled insult upon insult at Krishna, questioning his lineage, his morality, his right to be honored. Krishna remained silent at first, but when the 100th insult passed Shishupala's lips, Krishna raised his hand and released his chakra. It sliced through the air, and silence fell. The headless body of Shishupala crumpled at the king's feet. No one questioned Krishna again. And yet, amidst all this glory, Yudhishthira made a fatal choice. He agreed to play dice. Duryodhana's invitation was polite. A family game, he said, nothing more. But in that hall, the dice were loaded, the rules twisted, and the players masked with smiles. Yudhishthira lost his gold, his elephants, his armies. He lost his brothers, himself, and finally he staked Draupadi. But that is for another night. For now, let us leave Indraprastha as it was glowing with glory, ringing with music, painted in laughter and hope. Before betrayal entered the room, before shame tore through silk, before fire rose again, let the palace shimmer a little longer. Let dreams breathe. There is a stillness that comes before betrayal. It is not the stillness of peace, nor the hush of nightfall. It is heavier, like the sky waiting to fall. And in the grand court of Hastinapura, that silence sat like a coiled serpent, silent, but watching. Here begins a moment so harrowing, so profound, that even time itself seemed to hesitate before letting it pass. It was Duryodhana's invitation, wrapped in courtesy, dressed in silk. A simple game of dice, he said. To Yudhishthira, this was not merely a game. Dice were more than play. They were an ancient rite, a test of luck against will, a tradition among kings. Refusing would insult his elders, his hosts, the very throne of Hastinapura. So he accepted. But as the Pandavas entered the court, something was wrong. The lamps were lit, but their light felt cold. The walls echoed, but with a hollow murmur. And seated at the head of the chamber, Shakuni, uncle of Duryodhana, grinning softly, the dice already warm in his hands. Shakuni did not play for leisure. He played to destroy. He had carved those dice himself from the bones of his father, and they listened to no one but him. The court gathered. Bhishma, white-haired and weary, sat in sorrowful silence. Drona, the teacher, lowered his eyes. Dhritarashtra, the blind king, listened, but did not speak. The game began. Yudhishthira wagered modestly at first, a few jewels, some ornaments, and lost. Again and again. The dice never favored him, but with each loss, Shakuni urged him forward. Surely the great Yudhishthira will not retreat now. What will the world say? That the king of righteousness fled a game of dice. Words stung deeper than spears, bound by pride, by dharma, by a sense of royal dignity. Yudhishthira continued. He staked his elephants, his horses, his soldiers. He lost them all. The court shifted. Whispers began. Still, he played. He wagered his lands, his treasury, his cities. Gone, then his brothers. Nakula, the beautiful one, lost. Sahadeva, the wise, gone. Arjuna, the invincible, lost. Bhima, the thunder-hearted, wagered and defeated, and then he staked himself. I have nothing left but myself, he said, and with a single toss, Yudhishthira became a slave. The silence in the court turned brittle. Then Duryodhana spoke, his voice calm, his words sharp. There is still something left. Eyes turned. What of Draupadi, he said, the shared wife of the Pandavas? Is she not theirs? Is she not property? Yudhishthira hesitated. Bound by shame, confusion, dharma twisted out of form, and the dice rolled again. And Draupadi was lost. She was not present. She was in her chambers, surrounded by silk and song, unaware of the betrayal unfolding beyond the marble walls. A guard came. You are summoned to the court, he said. Summoned? By whom? By your husbands. You have been wagered and lost. The world fell away from her feet, but she did not cry. She straightened her back, stepped forward. Ask them, she said, before I come. Was I lost before or after Yudhishthira lost himself? For if he no longer owned himself, how could he stake me? The guard returned, relayed her words, and the question pierced the court like thunder. Bhishma, the grandsire, trembled. "This is a knot of dharma," he said. "I cannot untie it." Duryodhana laughed. "Then untie her hair instead." And he sent Dushasana, his brother, a brute without shame, without honor. He dragged Draupadi into the hall by the arm, by the hair. She stood in the center, humiliated, yet tall. Her voice rose, calm, clear. "I, Draupadi, ask this court, was I rightly lost?" No one answered, not Bhishma, not Drona, not even the blind king. Duryodhana leaned back and tapped his thigh. "Come sit here, my queen." And with that, the line between mockery and blasphemy shattered. Bhima growled, "I swear I shall break that thigh with my bare hands." The court turned savage. Dushasana reached for her robes. He tugged, and she cried out, not to the court, not to her husbands, but to Krishna. "O Govinda, save me." And from far away, from Dwarka, from the heart of time, he heard. Her sari unraveled, but did not end. Layer upon layer, it flowed, endless as her dignity, infinite as her faith. Dushasana tugged until he collapsed in exhaustion, drenched in sweat, defeated by divinity. But the damage had been done. The court had watched in silence. The elders had stood still, the husbands bound by their vow, their shame had wept, but not acted. Only Bhima swore an oath. "I shall tear open Dushasana's chest and drink his blood, and I shall smash Duryodhana's thigh where he dared invite my queen." Draupadi, eyes burning, spoke last. "I too make a vow," she said. "This hair, this braid that he dragged through dust, shall remain unbound until it is washed with the blood of my enemies." Eventually, Dhritarashtra, frightened by the omens, by the whispers of divine wrath, offered Draupadi boons. She asked for her husband's freedom, then their weapons, then their honor, and refused anything more, for what she wanted was justice, not mercy. The game was over, but the war had begun, not of weapons yet, but of vows, of wounds that would not heal, of pride that would fester. The dice had done what no arrow could. They had broken the spine of peace, and Burit would bleed. Night came, not as a blanket of peace, but as a shroud of disgrace. The halls of Hastinapura, once filled with music and wisdom, now echoed only with whispers, shameful, bitter, broken. The game was over, but its wounds remained. Yudhishthira and his brothers, once kings, now outcasts, left their shining Indraprastha behind, not in chains, not by force, but by vow. For such was the cruel design of the dice, 13 years in exile, with the last to be spent in absolute disguise. If they were discovered in that final year, the clock would reset, and their exile would begin anew. Draupadi walked with them, barefoot, her crown traded for dust, her silks for bark, her laughter swallowed by silence. The road ahead was long, and the forest waited. The first days, from thrones to thorns, their journey began through fields once ruled, now alien. As they passed through villages, some wept for them, others turned away. The Pandavas, sons of gods, born for greatness, now wore skins of deer and ate fruits plucked from the forest floor. The wilderness became their new palace, trees their pillars, rivers their silver tapestries. But even amidst nature's grandeur, sorrow lingered. Yudhishthira, broken by guilt, refused to speak of revenge. He spent his days in prayer, in debate with sages, trying to untangle the knots of dharma that had bound him to shame. Bhima seethed. Every rustling leaf reminded him of Dushasana's laughter. Every wind that passed over Draupadi's hair felt like mockery. I should have killed them, he would mutter, right there, in that hall of silence. Arjuna said little. He watched the sky, his mind burdened with dreams of weapons and war. Nakula and Sahadeva, the twins, served loyal patient. Their youthful mirth dimmed, but not lost. And Draupadi, Draupadi. Draupadi's fire, the queen who had once stood radiant in Indraprastha, now slept on earth. Her feet cracked from the stones, her hands rough from tending to the wounded. Yet in her eyes, no surrender. She spoke rarely, but when she did, her words burned. Tell me, she said one night, what good is a vow if it shames your soul? She did not ask for comfort, she asked for justice. And her pain became a silent vow, shared by the forest itself. Even the animals seemed to listen when she wept. Visits from the divine exile did not mean isolation. The forest, as ancient as time itself, was no ordinary place. It breathed with stories. Every root had memory. Every breeze carried whispers. Sages came Vyasa, the seer, among them to counsel the Pandavas. They spoke of destiny, of patience, of the long arc of fate. At the riverbanks, gods appeared. Surya, the sun god, gifted Draupadi a magical vessel, the Akshayapatra, which would never run empty, so long as her household had not eaten. Even in suffering, the divine did not abandon them. And yet, it was not enough. The wounds of the court still bled. Arjuna's ascent to the heavens in the 4th year of exile, Arjuna left his brothers. He climbed the Himalayas, seeking weapons not of iron, but of divinity. He met Shiva not as a god, but as a hunter. They fought, arrows clashing like thunder. When Arjuna bled, but did not yield, Shiva smiled and blessed him. From there, Arjuna rose, literally, lifted into the heavens, to the courts of Indra, his celestial father. There, amidst clouds and immortals, Arjuna learned the dance of war. He mastered the Divyastras, divine weapons of unimaginable power. But even the heavens tested him. Urvashi, a celestial dancer, desired him. But he rejected her, calling her mother, for she had once wed his ancestors. Angered, she cursed him, that he would become a eunuch for a year. A curse, it seemed. But destiny never wastes its ink. Bhima and the forest trials, while Arjuna soared through the skies, Bhima walked through fire. In the deeper forest, the Pandavas encountered Hidimba, a Rakshasa, a forest demoness. But instead of battle, she offered love. Bhima married her for a time, and from their union was born Gatotkacha, a child of both shadow and heroism, who would later rise as a titan in the Great War. Bhima's trials didn't end there. He dueled the mighty Hanuman, his brother by spirit, both sons of the wind god Vayu. Hanuman, disguised as an old monkey blocking the path, challenged Bhima's pride, and in humbling himself before the great Vanara, Bhima gained not only strength, but wisdom. Draupadi and the trial of patience Draupadi's rage did not dim, but it was forged into steel. Once they were visited by Jayadratha, a wicked prince and distant relative. He saw Draupadi alone in the forest and tried to abduct her. Bhima and Arjuna pursued him. They rescued her, and Bhima, true to his oath, wanted to kill the man on the spot. But Yudhishthira said no. He is a relative. Spare his life. So they humiliated Jayadratha, shaved his head, marked him with shame. But the wound to Draupadi was not healed. She looked at Yudhishthira with quiet sorrow. Mercy is not always dharma, she said, not when it costs dignity. 12 years passed, season after season turned. The brothers grew stronger. Their children, born in forest hermitages, learned the ways of warriors and sages alike. Stories of their exile became legend. How Yudhishthira debated rishis, how Bhima tamed beasts, how Arjuna shot fish eyes, blindfolded from miles away. They met kings, demons, and even celestial beings, each encounter shaping the road ahead. But as the 12th year faded, a shadow returned. The 13th year approached, and with it, the challenge of anonymity. The final year, incognito, the dice had demanded more than exile. The last year was to be spent in complete disguise, unseen, unknown. If even one of them was discovered, all would be forfeit. So they turned to Matsya, a distant kingdom. Each took on a hidden role. Yudhishthira became Kanka, a humble courtier. Bhima served as a cook, but crushed wild beasts with his fists at night. Arjuna, with Urvashi's curse now a blessing, became Brihanala, a dancing teacher. Nakula and Sahadeva tended horses and cattle. And Draupadi, proud, radiant, became a maid to the queen. For a full year they lived hidden, yet not defeated, not broken, watching, waiting, until the day came when the veil would be lifted. And so 13 years passed, from kings to wanderers, from silk to bark, from the roar of battle to the rustle of leaves. But fire, when buried, does not die. It waits, and when it rises, it burns all the brighter. Even silence can crack under the weight of time. 13 years had passed. 13 long years of exile, of dust and bark and patient agony. And now, with the disguise fulfilled, with the vow of anonymity honored, the Pandavas stepped once more into the light, not as wanderers, not as beggars, but as kings who had kept their word. The forest had burned their sorrow into steel. The sky itself now seemed to hold its breath, sensing that the winds of destiny were shifting. From Matsya to Indraprastha, from the whispering trees to the blood-warmed earth, the drums of reckoning began to murmur once more. The time had come, and the first sound of war was not the clang of steel. It was the soft, resonant voice of Krishna. the return and the demand when the exile ended, Yudhishthira did not march with swords raised. His heart still clung to peace, the fragile thread of diplomacy. But justice had to be sought. They sent envoys first, soft words, reasonable requests. "Give us Indraprastha," they said. Duryodhana laughed. "No, then give us 5 villages, small, unremarkable, one for each brother." "No," he sneered, "not even enough land to drive a needle into." In that refusal, war was born. But Yudhishthira, ever the servant of Dharma, did not yet unsheath his sword. Instead, he turned to the only man who could still bridge this chasm. Krishna, the dark-skinned prince of Dwarka, the god who walked as man, the friend of Arjuna, the keeper of time's secrets. Krishna's journey, Krishna did not ride in thunder. He rode alone, humble, without weapons. He entered Hastinapura not as a conqueror, but as a messenger of peace. The streets were silent as he passed. Eyes followed him, some hopeful, some wary. For even Duryodhana knew that this was not just a man. This was fate cloaked in human form. The court was assembled. Bhishma sat still, his face unreadable. Drona, the teacher, held his breath. Vijara, wise and kind, looked on with pain. Dhritarashtra, the blind king, strained to hear, knowing full well that this moment would shape history. Krishna rose. His voice did not thunder. It glowed. He spoke not of victory, but of balance. He did not plead. He reminded. "Duryodhana," he said, "you have mocked honor. You have humiliated a queen. You have poisoned your house with envy. But peace is still within reach. Return to the Pandavas what is theirs by right, and the world will bow to your wisdom, not your pride." The court held its breath, and Duryodhana laughed. "The last thread breaks. Why have you come, cowherd?" Duryodhana spat. "To wag your tongue and play God. Do you think we fear your tricks?" He turned to the court, to the elders who had raised him. "Do you all see?" he roared. "This is what they send a meddling trickster in place of an army." Then he whispered to his guards, "Seize him." The air froze. But Krishna smiled. And for the first time, the mortal veil lifted. From his form burst light, endless, searing, cosmic. He showed them who he truly was, the Vishvarupa, the universal form. 1,000 eyes, 1,000 arms, 1,000 suns glowing with creation and destruction. The court fell to its knees. Bhishma wept. Drona trembled. Dhritarashtra, though blind, cried out, "Let me see." And Krishna, in mercy, gave him vision just for a moment. And in that moment, the king saw eternity. And it broke him. "Take it away," he begged. "I cannot bear it." Krishna returned to his form, then turned to Duryodhana. "You tried to bind me," he said, "but how can you bind time? You wished for war, and now it shall come." He walked away, his steps soft, but every echo a tolling bell. Allies gather, armies rise from the corners of Burat, warriors stirred. The call had gone out. The great war was no longer rumor. It was real, and kings had to choose. To Dwaraka, to Krishna, both Arjuna and Duryodhana had gone earlier, seeking alliance. Krishna offered them a choice. One could have his massive army, the Narayani Sena. The other could have himself, unarmed, as a charioteer. Duryodhana rushed to speak first. "I choose your army," he said, and Arjuna smiled. "Then I choose you," Duryodhana laughed. 1,000 soldiers over a single man, but he did not understand. That man would soon change the fate of the world. Kurukshetra, the land of Dharma, the field was chosen, Kurukshetra. A sacred land, a battlefield where kings once prayed and sages had meditated. Now it would drink blood. 18 Akshahinis of armies assembled, millions of soldiers, elephants, horses, chariots. Banners waved like the wings of ravens. War cries echoed in the wind. On one side, the Kauravas, led by Duryodhana, backed by Bhishma, Drona, Karna, Shakuni, and a host of loyal kings. On the other, the Pandavas, with Krishna, the 5 brothers, and mighty allies like Drupada, Satyaki, Abhimanyu, and Gatotkacha. Even the gods looked down with uneasy eyes. This was not just a battle. It was a war for the soul of Bharat. The eve of war, the night before battle, the Pandavas sat in their tents, not celebrating, but remembering. Draupadi lit a small lamp. Bhima sharpened his mace. Sahadeva prayed to the stars. Yudhishthira wept quietly, for he knew what was coming, the death of elders, of kin, of Dharma itself. And Arjuna sat alone, silent, his bow beside him, waiting. Krishna sat beside him, his eyes gazing far beyond the battlefield. "Do you know," he said softly, "tomorrow you will face your grandfather, your teacher, your cousins, your brothers." Arjuna nodded. "And I must kill them." Krishna did not answer, because tomorrow's dawn would bring not just war, but a divine revelation. The final sunset, as the sun dipped behind the hills of Kurukshetra, a golden glow spilled across the field, touching shields, helms, chariots, and spears. It was a sunset like no other. The last peace before the storm. Some soldiers wept. Others wrote final letters to wives and mothers. Bhishma, the grandsire, stood silently under his banner of silver and swan, his heart heavy with a duty he never wanted. And in the Pandava camp, Krishna whispered one last time to Arjuna. "Sleep tonight," he said, "for tomorrow I shall show you the universe itself." The sun had barely risen, but its golden rays stretched far across the blood-colored earth of Kurukshetra, glinting on thousands of shields and polished helms, like fire dancing on waves of steel. The armies stood motionless, 2 tides poised to crash. Chariots lined the field like restless beasts. Elephants stamped the soil, sensing the tension in the air. War horns groaned low, like some ancient beast breathing in its sleep, about to awaken. And then, a single chariot rolled forward, not just any chariot. A golden one, guided by 4 white horses, radiant and noble. In it stood Arjuna, warrior, prince hero, and at the reins his friend, his cousin, his charioteer, Krishna. A warrior's heart breaks Arjuna, son of Pandu, bearer of the great bow Gandhava. had fought countless battles. He had defeated gods, shot down flying beasts, stood unshaken against oceans of enemies. But as he looked across the field, his hands trembled. On the other side stood not monsters. They were family. His grandsire Bhishma, who had once cradled him as a child. His teacher Drona, who had placed a bow in his hand. His cousins, his uncles, friends from his youth, people he had laughed with, eaten with, grown beside. And now he was to strike them down. His knees buckled, his mouth dried, his bow slipped from his grasp, and he turned to Krishna. I cannot fight. The mighty Arjuna, the peerless archer, lowered his eyes and whispered, My limbs fail me, Krishna. My mind is in confusion. I see no victory, no joy, no peace. What is the point of this battle? Kingdom, pleasure, power, none of it matters if those I love lie dead. He paused, breathing hard, like a man drowning in sorrow. I will not fight. The words fell heavy, like a silence before thunder. Krishna looked at Arjuna and smiled, but it was not the smile of mockery. It was the smile of one who sees further than the horizon, who knows the forest beyond the trees, who hears the music in the silence. He did not scold. He began to teach, not with sermons, but with truth. And what followed became the Gita, the song of God. A conversation between a man and the divine, between doubt and understanding, between fear and freedom. The nature of duty, Arjuna, Krishna began softly. This body is temporary. The soul is eternal. You speak of death, but who truly dies? Just as a man discards worn clothes, the soul discards the body. Death is not the end. It is a passage. Arjuna closed his eyes, but the war, Krishna reminded him, was not about hatred. It was about dharma, sacred duty. To fight for justice is not violence. To fight to protect, to uphold righteousness. This is your path. Abandoning it is the true betrayal, the bondage of action. But Krishna, Arjuna asked, if action binds, then should I renounce it? Should I walk away, seek peace in the forest, become a hermit? Krishna shook his head. Renunciation does not lie in escape. Act, Arjuna, but do not cling to the fruits of your actions. Do what is right, not for gain, not for glory, not for outcome, but because it is your role in the grand weaving of the cosmos. This was the heart of Karma Yoga. Act without attachment. Be like the lotus, untouched by the muddy waters it grows from. True wisdom. Then what is true wisdom? Arjuna asked. Seeing the self in all beings, Krishna replied, and all beings in the self. He described the Sthitaprajna, the man of steady wisdom. He who is not shaken by pleasure or pain, who is not attached to joy nor terrified by sorrow, who sees gold and stone with equal eyes. This is the man who walks with peace, even amidst war. Paths to the divine. Krishna then revealed the many ways to reach the divine. Karma Yoga, the path of selfless action. Bhakti Yoga, the path of loving devotion. Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge and inner inquiry. He showed that truth was not a single door, but many paths converging toward one light. And in each path, the traveler must give up ego, that illusion of I and mine. Only then can the soul glimpse the eternal, the cosmic form, and then Arjuna made a request. "Show me," he whispered, "your true form." Krishna nodded, and time itself seemed to pause. Arjuna saw not his friend, not a charioteer, but the universe, a form beyond comprehension. Eyes like galaxies, arms like mountains, mouths devouring suns. He saw creation and destruction in every breath. He saw birth and death and rebirth again. He saw every god, every beast, every soul flickering, dancing, dissolving, all within Krishna. It overwhelmed him. He fell to his knees, tears flowing, hands joined. "O Lord," he cried, "forgive me. I spoke to you as a friend, unaware. Show me again your gentle form, for my heart cannot bear the universe." And Krishna returned, soft-eyed, radiant, calm. As a friend, as a guide, the awakening Arjuna, once broken, now stood still. Calm, not hardened, but clear. "I understand," he said. "I see now. I am not the doer. I am the instrument. I will fight, not for power, not for revenge, but for truth." Krishna smiled, and the horses stirred. A battlefield transformed, the war still waited. The blood would still be shed. But Arjuna had changed. Within the storm, he had found the I. And that was the true victory. The Bhagavad Gita was not just a teaching. It was a mirror held up not just to Arjuna, but to every soul who stands torn between fear and purpose, between despair and duty. A whisper for the sleeper, and now, dear listener, as you lie beneath your covers, warm, safe, still think of Arjuna, kneeling in that chariot, the wind whispering across the fields of Kurukshetra. Think of the battle not just outside, but within. And know that the voice of Krishna, calm, eternal, speaks even now when your heart falters. In dreams and doubts and quiet nights like this, the silence did not last. After the Gita's revelation, the chariot wheels turned once more. The white horses stirred, their breath rising in the cool dawn air, and the field of Kurukshetra finally awakened. Not with shouts, but with the long, solemn blast of a conch. Krishna raised his Panchajanya. Its deep tone thundered across the sky, not just as a signal to begin, but as a final, haunting farewell to peace. From every side, conches answered, Shanka after Shanka. The war shells of ancient kings wailed like spirits. The war had begun, and for the first 10 days, it belonged to one man, Bhishma, the grandsire of the battlefield. If ever a man was forged from both steel and sorrow, it was Bhishma, son of the great river Ganga, sworn celibate, sworn protector, the pillar of Hastinapura, and now its weapon. He stood tall on his chariot, his silver beard flowing like a banner, his armor glinting like the moon. His banner bore the image of a swan, graceful, wise, and deadly in stillness. To the Pandavas, he was beloved. To the Kauravas, essential. To himself, a man of shattered dharma, because even as he raised his bow, his heart cracked. But duty for Bhishma was not a thing to be questioned. It was a commandment carved into his very breath. Day 1. The first blood with the rising sun came the first clash of armies. Tens of thousands surged like rivers colliding. War cries mingled with neighing horses and the roar of elephants. Chariots spun like whirlwinds, and at the center of it all, Bhishma. He was a storm given form. His arrows flew faster than thought, cutting down foot soldiers like wheat. No warrior, not even Bhima or Yudhishthira, could come close to him. He rained fire, and the Pandavas bled. The war had begun with loss, and it did not relent. Day after day, the unstoppable force each dawn brought a new sea of blood. And each night, the stars bore witness to funerals beneath the sky. But Bhishma remained untouchable. Arjuna, the greatest archer alive, hesitated to strike. How could he? This was Bhishma, the man who had once placed him on his knee, who had blessed his bow, who had stood beside him at Draupadi's wedding. How do you shoot an arrow through love? And Bhishma, too, held back. Though deadly in aim, he struck not to kill. He wounded, crushed, paralyzed, but he did not sever heads. Each evening he prayed alone, his tears hidden behind steel. For 10 days, the Kauravas surged ahead, and the Pandavas, despite all their might, could not stop the hurricane that was Bhishma. The dilemma Yudhishthira, noble yet burdened, came to Krishna one evening. What is the point? He asked. We fight and fall. The war belongs to Bhishma. How can we win when he stands like a mountain in our path? Krishna listened. And then, with the weight of sorrow, he whispered, Bhishma cannot be killed as long as he wills to live. His soul is tethered to his vow, not his body. The brothers looked at one another, confused. Then Krishna said gently, There is one among you who can break this knot, not with strength, but with truth. And they understood, a son against his father Shikundi, a warrior who had once been a woman, a soul reborn in fury, born as the daughter of King Drupada, reincarnated with a purpose to bring Bhishma down, because in a past life they had been Amba, the woman humiliated by Bhishma, who swore vengeance unto death and beyond. Now, Shikundi stood among the Pandavas, carrying not just a bow, but a karmic fire centuries old. Bhishma had made a vow never to raise arms against a woman, or one who had been born as such. And Krishna, with quiet gravity, said, Place Shikundi at the front. Let him face Bhishma. Let Arjuna follow close, and when Bhishma lowers his bow, shoot. Day 10. The fall of a legend, the sky was crimson even before dawn. It was as if the earth already wept for what was to come. Shikundi rode forward, fearless. Bhishma saw him. He recognized the face, and he lowered his bow, not in weakness, but in acceptance. The man who had vowed to protect now offered no defense. Arjuna, his heart trembling, stepped forward behind Shikundi. His bow hummed. He fired, arrow after arrow, each aimed not at the soul, but at the body, to wound, to slow, to bring low, but never to dishonor. Each shaft struck. Bhishma did not cry out. He fell not onto the earth, but onto a bed of arrows, suspended above the ground. His body pierced, yet his spirit still unbroken. He had chosen his time, for Bhishma, blessed with Ika Emritu, the boon of choosing his moment of death, did not yet wish to leave. Suspended between worlds, the battlefield fell silent. Even the crows dared not cry. Bhishma, lying upon a bed of arrows, his body unmoving, his eyes still clear, looked toward the sky. His breaths were shallow, but his voice was calm. "I will wait," he said. "I will leave this world when the sun turns northward. Until then, I shall remain." The war did not stop, but time paused for a moment. The Pandavas approached him with reverence. Even Duryodhana, proud and broken, came to kneel. Bhishma became not a general now, but a sage, a teacher once more. And from that bed of pain, he would give lessons still, of kingship, of dharma, of truth. The night falls, as the sun dipped low on the 10th day. The battlefield no longer echoed with screams. Only the wind moved, rustling the tall grasses stained red. The first great chapter of the war had ended, and though Bhishma still breathed, his fall marked a turning point. The mountain had crumbled, and what came next would be rivers of fire. But as sleep takes your eyes, dear listener, picture Bhishma, lying upon his arrows, looking not at his wounds, but at the stars, waiting for the right moment to join them. The battlefield still smelled of blood and sandalwood. Bhishma's fall had hushed the earth, like a father's silence after years of thunder. But the war did not pause to grieve. It shifted, darker, crueler, more desperate. And in the hollow left behind by the grandsire, another figure stepped forward. He had once cradled scrolls, not swords. He had once whispered verses, not curses. But now he became something else entirely. Drona, the teacher of kings, the master of Brahmastras, the sage-turned-slayer. A teacher once loved Drona's beginnings were not forged in fire, but in learning. He had studied in silence, lived in simplicity. His only wealth the wisdom of the Vedas and the precision of the bow. He had taught both sides, Kaurava and Pandava. It was he who had shown Arjuna the art of aiming by ear alone, he who had watched Bhima grow with strength, and Bhishma grow in silence. His bond with Arjuna, in particular, was profound, like sculptor to sculpture. But Drona's heart bore its own storms. He had been wronged by royalty, humiliated by prideful kings. And though his face stayed calm, his soul knew the weight of unmet justice. Now, as the commander of the Kaurava army, he would teach one final lesson, not of archery, but of war. Drona takes command on the 11th day. As the dust from Bhishma's fall settled, Duryodhana turned to Drona with hollow eyes. "Win me this war," he demanded. Drona nodded, not with hunger, but with duty. The teacher stood tall atop his chariot, his beard now streaked with ash, his hands still steady despite the ache of age. His eyes scanned the field, but not for enemies. He was searching for meaning. Then, raising his bow, he announced a vow. I shall not put down my weapons until I have captured Yudhishthira alive. Not killed, captured. Why? Because Duryodhana, always the schemer, wanted his cousin humiliated, dragged before the court, shamed into a game of dice once again. Victory not through honor, but submission. Arjuna's dilemma. The vow sent a chill through the Pandava camp. Capturing Yudhishthira would mean defeat, not just of the army, but of their very cause. Arjuna was tasked with protecting his brother at all costs. But Drona's strength was not brute power, it was strategy. Each day, he formed new battle formations, Chakravyuha, Makara, Vajra, sacred geometries of death designed to trap, confuse, and kill. He shifted his soldiers like lines of a mantra, rearranged with divine precision. It was a puzzle Arjuna had to solve each morning, and the stakes were lives. 12 days of terror, from the 11th to the 22nd day. Drona turned the battlefield into a classroom of pain. He killed thousands. He wielded the Brahmastra, a celestial weapon, scorching through the air like a comet. Even mighty warriors like Drupada and Virata fell before him. Kings who had once laughed in his presence now lay broken at his feet. Each evening, as the sun vanished in smoke, Drona would sit alone in his tent, his face unreadable, his hands trembling. Because even as he fought for Duryodhana, he was still, in his soul, a teacher. And each life he ended, he remembered their name, their posture in class, their smile as a boy. Ashwathama, the shadow of his father, but Drona was not alone in this tale. His son Ashwathama rode beside him, a figure of fury, silence, and unsettling calm, born with a jewel in his forehead, blessed with a spark of immortality. Ashwathama was both warrior and curse. He carried the weight of his father's honor, and his ambition burned brighter than Drona's own. Where Drona hesitated, Ashwathama struck. Where Drona grieved, Ashwathama raged. He slaughtered without pause, his eyes vacant, as though his soul were already drifting between this world and another. And yet, he loved his father ferociously, unconditionally. The unthinkable plan the Pandavas soon realized: Drona could not be defeated in combat, not while his will stood strong, not while his heart beat with purpose. But what if that purpose broke? Krishna, quiet as always, offered a path wrapped not in honor, but in illusion. He turned to Bhima and said, "There is an elephant named Ashwathama in the Kaurava army. Kill it." Bhima did, and as Drona surged through the battlefield, unstoppable, Krishna told Yudhishthira, "Tell him Ashwathama is dead." Yudhishthira, the man of truth, the man whose chariot hovered inches above the ground, because he had never lied, hesitated. He had never deceived, even in jest. But this war had stained every ideal. So, when Drona approached and asked, "Is it true? Is Ashwathama dead?" Yudhishthira whispered, "Ashwathama is dead." And under his breath, barely audible, the elephant, a half-truth, a whispered death. And with that, Drona's world crumbled. The death of the teacher, he sank to his knees. His bow dropped. The battlefield blurred before his eyes. No longer a place of war, but a graveyard of dreams. His son, his lineage, gone. In that instant, Drishtadyumna, the son of Drupada, born to kill Drona, took his chance. He rushed forward and severed Drona's head, not from hatred, but from prophecy. The sage had become the slain. The teacher who once gave life through knowledge now died in silence. The ground does not rejoice. There was no celebration, no triumphant roar. Even the dust fell softly that day, because something sacred had been broken. A warrior can fall by blade, a king by ambition. But when a teacher dies through deceit, something ancient weeps. Yudhishthira's chariot touched the earth for the first time that evening. His truth, his crown, his dharma, all now stained by what had to be done. A moment for you now, as you lie in the quiet folds of sleep. Imagine Drona, not with a weapon, but seated beneath a tree long ago, teaching children how to string a bow. He never wanted war. He wanted legacy. And though it came cloaked in pain, his name would never be forgotten. And somewhere beyond time, his soul perhaps still walks, in twilight, in dreams, in the wind that brushes your cheek tonight. The sun still rose each morning. And yet, on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, its warmth felt colder now. The fall of Bhishma had shattered the foundation of tradition. The death of Drona had silenced the voice of wisdom, and in that heavy silence, where dharma itself seemed to hesitate, Karna stepped forward. Not as a side character, not as the loyal friend of Duryodhana, but as something more, a man of forgotten birth, a warrior of divine origin, a soul searching not for glory, but for identity. The boy in the basket, Karna's story, had begun long before arrows were nocked and swords were drawn. He had entered this world wrapped not in silks, but in secrecy, born to Kunti before her marriage through a divine boon. Karna was the son of Surya, the sun god. His birth was holy, yet hidden. He was placed in a river by trembling hands, a basket floating between reeds, like Moses of the Indian world, drifting toward a life of anonymity. A charioteer's family took him in. They named him Radhaya, and he grew up under the shadow of the noble, always yearning to stand in their light. The warrior without a name from boyhood, Karna dreamed not of riches or rule, but of respect. To wield a bow like Arjuna, to be called Kshatriya, warrior. But society, ever obsessed with bloodlines and birthrights, shut its gates to him. He was denied entry to schools, denied duels, denied dignity. And so he turned to another outcast, Parashurama, the axe-wielding Brahmin slayer. He lied to become his student, claiming to be of Brahmin birth. Parashurama, pleased, trained him in the secrets of celestial warfare. Until, one day, exhausted, Karna massaged his teacher's legs and endured the sting of a burrowing insect without flinching. Parashurama awoke and knew, this is no Brahmin. Only a Kshatriya bears pain in silence. In fury, he cursed Karna. In your moment of greatest need, your knowledge will fail you. And from that moment, Karna walked with two weights, the armor of a god and the curse of a teacher. Crowned by a friend when the world continued to spurn him, one man offered a hand, Duryodhana. In Karna, he saw not just a warrior, but an ally to challenge the Pandavas. He crowned him king of Anga, giving him land, title, and honor, and Karna, in return, gave Duryodhana his eternal loyalty. Not because he agreed with his every act, but because he had been seen. Sometimes, love is born not from shared ideals, but from shared pain. The thunder before the storm now, with Bhishma and Drona gone, Karna was made general. It was what he had long waited for, a chance to finally stand opposite Arjuna, not as a rival, but as an equal. The world watched, so did the gods. And as Karna stepped onto the field, his golden armor shone not with divine light, but with the wear of a life spent fighting for place and purpose. The duel of brothers, unspoken, neither Arjuna nor Karna knew yet that they were brothers, born of the same mother, two sons drawn toward the same sky. But the universe did, and on the 17th day, it set the stage for a battle unlike any other. Karna rode into battle in a chariot driven by Shalya, a reluctant ally from the Pandava side, placed there by Krishna's cunning. Shalya whispered doubt in his ear, undermining his every move. Yet Karna pressed on, undeterred. Each time his arrows met Arjuna's, sparks lit the air. Each time their wheels turned, the very earth seemed to hold its breath. It was not just a duel of skill. It was a duel of fates. The wheel sinks, and then fate whispered the curse. Karna's chariot wheel sank into the mud, a trick of terrain, or destiny's cold hand. He leapt down to lift it, desperate, breathless. He turned to Arjuna and cried, "Wait, you are a warrior. Strike me only when I am armed and ready." Arjuna hesitated, but Krishna, the charioteer, the guide, the knower of all stories, urged him forward. "This is not the time for honor," he said. "This is the time for justice. Remember Abhimanyu." Karna had taken part in the boys' slaughter, surrounded and weaponless. Now the wheel of karma turned, and Arjuna loosed his arrow. It flew straight, sure, final, and the sun's sun fell. The sky mourns. There was no joy in Arjuna's heart, only a silence that screamed. Karna, even in death, was magnificent. He had fought with everything: skill, dignity, loyalty, and yet died nameless, birthright hidden even from himself. Only later would the truth be revealed. Kunti, weeping and trembling, would tell her sons, "He was your elder brother, my firstborn." And Yudhishthira, crushed, would vow, "No king shall ever praise me until Karna's name is spoken first." The man denied everything in life was finally honored in death. A thought before sleep now, as your body lies quiet and your eyes grow heavy. Let your thoughts drift to the sunlit plains where Karna once stood. A man of contradictions, divine, yet abandoned, gifted, yet cursed. He was not perfect, but he was true. And in the vast poem of the Mahabharata, perhaps none burns so beautifully as the hero who never knew he was one. Sleep now beneath the warmth of his light.